I spent 2 years obsessing over why brands like Stussy, Nothing, and Labo feel completely different from the sea of competitors the second you land on their website. And after studying their best-in-class design and working with dozens of brands doing $1 to $15 million a year, I can assure you it's not better products or a bigger budget. It's 3 categories of intentional design that make a store feel irresistible to look at, but dead simple to use for their audience. And these are possible with good skill, but very enhanced with AI tooling. There's a level of craftsmanship here from a human that matters, because it's all rooted in taste and how a real user actually moves through a store. The way an asset is shot, the fonts, the UX decisions that feel invisible but quietly guide you towards checkout. These are decisions made by individuals and teams, and I have the examples to prove it. So let's start with the first category. I call it performance, and the brand that nails it is Stussy. To introduce a performance website, to me, these are websites that really push sales, essentially. So they really emphasize increasing metrics like conversion rates and average order value. Stussy is not the perfect example of this. I think it is the best looking example of this. A lot of brands I work with want to look good, and I think Stussy's web designer does an amazing job at making a drop-to-drop based website. I know their web designer is a smaller agency, so let's assume Stussy's actual e-commerce team is rather small, like less than 4 people. So a homepage like this is actually very easy to set up. We just did something like this last month where essentially it's one section that just associates images and links together. It looks like they're mixing some lay flats here, some model shots, and then even some more campaign focused imagery. It's important to note this is built in Shopify. Every site I show today is Shopify based. Some are headless, some are all-in-one liquid, but the liquid code actually lets you customize this stuff pretty easily. The second piece is not the most exciting thing, but it is probably the most important. That's the navigation and figuring out the organization of it. The Western world reads top left to bottom right. Stussy does have localized websites, but we're on a US version, so let's kind of look at this for now. The first item is going to be the most important item, the first item people see. It looks like they're pushing new arrivals. Again, they're a drop-to-drop based brand. Some more evergreen brands will do like best sellers, sale, or like bundle offers, like buy 3, get 30% off. And then they'll run up the categories of clothing and product that they have. It looks like they're pushing sunglasses first. I'm assuming because seeing this first hero picture, they're wearing sunglasses. So let's assume they want to push sunglasses in this new drop. Navigation needs to consider how a person shops. If you want to get more advanced with this, you could do shop by color, shop by specific collection or season. I actually just really like how Stussy keeps it very simple here. So clicking into one of these links, you get something called a collection page, otherwise known as a PLP. It's very common. PLPs are the first page most users land on, and that's due to meta ads being pushed to this, or in Stussy's case, email marketing. So this example, they're pushing Our Legacy collab, and it's actually taking you to a collection page of the Our Legacy. The best PLPs always have some sort of navigation to other categories of products. Again, Stussy uses their primary nav for this, but see, we're filtered by sizes here. A lot of common sites will have links up there as well. As long as it's above the fold on mobile in some way where you can easily navigate, you have a pretty good PLP, I would say. Because you have to imagine someone's coming from email or ads or something. They might not want to just hit these first like 4 products. They might want to be moving around the website a little bit more. Another big function is having search. That's very important. So that's kind of basic PLP stuff. Stussy really likes this kind of editorial look, and they do this in a few ways. One is very small text. It looks like they're running 10 pixel font sizes here. I think the editorial look to me is always like 12 pixels and below. I wouldn't go below 12 pixels. That's actually not accessible. But the point of that is having a smaller font kind of lets you look at the imagery a little bit more. And that's the number one thing a shopper is going to want to look at is images. Smaller detail. I like how the lay flats here have like this cream off-white background. It's just a nice little personal touch they can have. And then you can actually see that you can quick select a size. Usually it's quick add, but they do it in an interesting way. If I click size medium, it's going to automatically select the medium. This is a design that actually increases add to cart rates. We've seen this with a client called Ours. To quickly kind of go over to mobile isn't going to see something like this because they don't have hover functionality. Sometimes you'll see a little plus button, but it doesn't look like they have that in this case. So let's talk about product pages now. This is actually a big number 1 lander as well for new users. They follow the same principle, small text, huge image. They actually run emails directly to this, which I would recommend for email marketing is hitting product pages directly. I could get really in depth about some of these details. What I like is a stylistic choice of using lay flats for the color variants here. Product details are not like text walls. They actually use M dashes to kind of quickly scan. Size guides are very good, and I think size guides are the second most important thing in fashion e-com to imagery. They're doing everything right here. They're showing the model height and what size the model is wearing for reference. They're describing how they actually took the product measurements in the table below. They have inches to centimeters, which works for everyone. They have the core kind of 4 size rows: chest, length, sleeve, and shoulder. They're showing an infograph on how the product is actually measured, and that's a really good size guide. I don't think I would actually change anything about that. Shipping and returns, you have to have this on PDPs. Again, this is going to be a first touch point for users. They're not going to go to the niche shipping page. They just want to quickly see what the shipping is like here. This is an interesting one though. A chat button. I've never actually seen this. I have to assume it actually does drive good results. They use an app called Gorgias. I actually don't know how to say it, but it's a very popular and very good app a lot of these mainstream brands will use for customer support. And I think it's just a value add. I actually don't see it subtracting from anything here. So unlike common performance sites to me, they're not upselling or cross-selling anything. Again, they're kind of doing this in this clean editorial aesthetic. So at the bottom of the page, there's no product recommendations. Even when you add an item to cart, sometimes you'll see like a quick accessory upsell here. There's none of that. Those are something, again, that boosts discoverability. But I think Stussy's pretty consistent navigation makes up for it. And I have to mention, this is a very hype-based brand. I wouldn't say it's as evergreen as like Lululemon or something. But again, visually, this is a very nice looking website and feels quite unique. Before we move into the next site, I want to shout out Darkroom. I just spent 5 days with them south of France at Cannes Lions with them. They hosted a villa with other creators like Oren, Ashwin, Tatum, really anyone that's very mainstream in the marketing branding space. I stayed with them too, and I posted some content around it. Definitely go check out the Darkroom profile. They are an amazing performance agency that has worked with brands like Olipop, Dead Cool, Crate and Barrel. It's a talented group of people that actually get the most important thing for a website: traffic to the website. The second type of website I want to talk about today is the brand experience website. This is a direction you take the website when the website actually isn't even the highest lever for sales. Instead of focusing on conversion, average order value, you're more focused on the emotion you leave the user with at the end of the day. Essentially making your website memorable, but also kind of catering to the very engaged, like top 5% of people that buy your product. The example I'm showing today is from Nothing. Nothing is a competitor to Apple. They make very similar products. Aesthetically might look cooler, I think. Tech in general, especially phones, people are going to be buying this stuff in store because they actually need to see the thing, they need to feel the thing and try the interface for themselves. It's quite a hard sell just from browsing the website. And the CEO actually states that the website is more for the very engaged users, again, who want to shop the more limited releases and collaborations they do. There's a few brand elements I really want to emphasize, and these actually could be part of a web design process, but I actually consider them to be more of a brand design process. The whole Nothing system is built on something called a dot grid, basically meaning everything's comprised of dots. So the Wordmark logo is completely made out of dots in their custom typeface. That same typeface is used on the site, mostly as like heading and display text. It might be hard to see in this recording, but there's a dot grid that is overlaid on the website that stays consistent as you scroll. And that's something called a graphic device. Basically, that means it's a vector illustration that you can use to make a layout more interesting. There's a lot of layering happening on this website too. The background consists of background image. That middle ground is that dot grid I was saying, but also this kind of bento box grid to show the product details. And then the foreground is, well, the navigation menu at the top, but also the product information on the bottom. They all have these rounded corner styles, which is very common in tech aesthetics. But the crazy thing about this is really like the assets that they create on this page. They don't have a lot of products. With how big Nothing's team is, this isn't like a significant amount, I would say. So think about all of the photography that shows up just on this one product page alone. There's videos, there's all of these spec details that are happening. Someone has to fill this out. There's this photography, and again, like more spec details. There's all of these 3D animations, this photography, this kind of UI motion happening. The setup time is insane. So compare this to Stussy, where the setup time would have been like nothing. This is like the polar opposite of that. So brand experience actually has a lot of clever web design plays, I think, with the layering again, but a lot of it is actually dictated by the assets that live on the page. The whole website, it's not actually that extensive. It's just covered in assets. The third category of website I'm going to talk about is the hybrid, which is essentially the combination of those first two categories I told you about. This is the category I think you generally want to be in. It's something that I really focus on with my studio. And I'm going to use Labo as an example. I think they have a lot of amazing brand elements, photography, interesting layouts, but I know they put a ton of effort into like the navigation here, for example. So let's take it back to like the actual branding elements here. The package and store design is like this brutalist kind of labyrinth aesthetic. It almost makes you kind of feel like a mad scientist. The brick wall walls, the chalkboards, and even the package design feels like there's some sort of like potion or chemical. And I say that in a good way. The photography certainly reflects that, but the web design nails it. What I love the most is just like the iconography. They are literally like chalk scribbles. Icons are something that are kind of forgotten about in a lot of like brand design, web design. They're actually really not that hard. There's only like a certain amount of icons you need for e-commerce. I just really appreciate that attention to detail. I think this off-white background color is very incredible. It looks clean, and then they have kind of like this dark gray contrasting over it. But those are kind of small things. I think let's talk about like the navigation and the more performance part about this. You can see the homepage is just completely like there is a ton of things to look at, and that's intentional because we're accounting for so many customers. Like Labo is a big brand. We actually want to make sure we have every user journey accounted for. Generally, how I think of it is like when you first start the homepage, you want to start refining down to like PLP's collection pages and then PDP's product pages. And I think they do exactly that here. It looks like, okay, they're even doing like a PLP list here. We'll go to body. This is a PLP now. And then we can click into the product page, PDP. You're slowly refining your results. And I think this pretty crazy overwhelming homepage does that. They have like a 4-way call to action split on the hero element, and that just works as a simple carousel. On mobile, you can kind of rotate between. The search bar actually feels a little emphasized just because it takes up the full width here and feels just bigger than everything else. In the industry of scents, it's actually pretty complicated for e-commerce because how do you smell a product online? You just can't. I think going back to the kind of performance side of things, this is more in strategy, but something that web design plays into a lot are things like adding free samples to carts or refilling your old bottles. These are a little more complicated to add from like a web design dev perspective, but it's a huge value add for customers. It's basically just adding a mini version of the product. And then having like personalization info is extremely nice. This is some coordination that happens with like the manufacturer and the website and when the order is placed. Sometimes you just want to send like a little string of JSON. It's not super complicated. It's more set up on like the manufacturer and logistics end. And then in-store pickup is something that Labo can pull off because they have so many stores around the world. Again, you just kind of want to lead people to trial the experience because you kind of need to smell something in person to really want to purchase it. This is why strategy before web design is necessary. When you have a more complicated product like this, you really want to figure out the functions of the website. If I'm going to break down their photography, they do this thing called nulling where you're kind of neatly arranging a bunch of different items. It looks like these are all the ingredients that go into the product, which is very creative. And then the actual product photography is consistently in this kind of gray setting, actually just showing you the label very cleanly here. Another piece of strategy here is gifting. Gifting is a huge thing. So if you're not going to try the fragrance, you're probably going to go to the website and send it to somebody for like a birthday, holiday, whatever it is. So that experience actually happens like within the checkout. They're even getting more advanced here. It looks like you can like build your own bundles as well. And gifting here is like, I think a very common thing is adding a note to the gift. You might be shipping it directly to the person you're gifting it to or giving it to your own address. Let's assume they put the note in the actual package. Again, this is like a communication with the manufacturer or 3PL, which is third-party location. Those are the people that ship the item and pack the item. Good ones are in America where they can pack things like pretty efficiently and they do stuff like this pretty well. China, you're probably going to have more difficulties. Again, this is like a similar process where placing the order on the website somehow communicates with that 3PL or manufacturer. It's usually like a JSON file using some sort of API. Something I want to call out too is their meta ads. I feel like maybe I'm all over the place here, but this is a huge website. This is an example of meta ads hitting product pages directly, but they're also hitting PLPs directly too. So you gotta kind of think of the first time a user hits the site, how can they easily discover it? And it's the crazy navigation at the top that really lets you do it. Again, this is strategy and also takes like a UX design brain. Being able to think from the customer POV, what is like the best checkout or shopping experience, and also thinking about all the different types of shoppers you have. So these are 3 web design examples of how I categorize different websites. What you pick really depends on the industry and audience, but I think in this video I covered different industries pretty well. While I showed bigger brands, I think the fact is that you can apply these learnings and these insights today DIY. And if you don't want to do DIY, you can hire a web designer and make sure they kind of follow these principles so you kind of know how to gauge and how to interview these people. If you like this video, subscribe. I have a web design studio called Shovel. I post website breakdown stuff like this, but I'm also posting more BTS on how I build the studio, even gonna have some AI content soon. So peace.